Today I was gonna open the Magic the Gathering Commander deck, Arcane Maelstorm. And it comes with at least one oversized foil um, collector type card, where this oversized one was a legendary creature, was supposed to represent, one of the possible um, commanders, and where it's green, blue, red, it's, you know, three colors that will represent, all the possible colors that you could play. And then you also have the regular size deck, so this guy is in a regular size, but if you wanted to use the bigger card, you could. I don't know if that's really tournament legal, but you could at least, tabletop, casual game with friends or whatever at your kitchen table, you could. And so in addition to the deck, there's spin down life counter. So the foil, one of the foil commanders is Calmax, the Storm Sire. As I said, he's a legendary creature. It's a 4/4 elemental dinosaur for one, a forest, island, and a mountain. Whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Calamax, the Storm Sire, is tapped, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Whenever you copy an instant spell, put a 1/1 counter on Calamax. And then we have another foil legendary creature, so I guess you could potentially use this as your commander if you wanted also. It's a 3/5 snake Leviathan for 2, a forest, an island, and a mountain. So again, within all three of the colors of the deck. Has flying. Whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one, they draw it into each of their draw steps. Create a 1/1 snake creature token. Whenever Zyrus, the Withering Storm, deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. And then we have Paladin, Avid Arcanist. It's a 1/4 human wizard for 2 and a island. It happens to be a legendary creature, but where this is a 3-color deck, you wouldn't want it as your commander because you can only play colors in your commander's mana cost, so it would have to be a commander for strictly a blue deck. Partner with Paco, Arcanine Retriever. When this creature enters the battlefield, target player may put Paco into their hand from their library and shuffle. You may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So this guy, can be paired with another creature, I guess, that it specifies, and you can. It says when it enters a battlefield, target player, but ideally you would be the target player because you would be pairing it with this guy. And actually, the next card happens to be that creature, Paco Arcane Retriever, which is a 3/3 Elemental Hound for 3 mountain in a forest. Happens to be a legendary creature, but it only has 2 of the 3 colors in this deck, so it would only be good for a commander for a red-green, not for the red-green-blue. So again, you're pairing it with Haldan Avid Architect. This guy has haste. Whenever Paco Arcane Retriever attacks, exile the top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on each of them. Put a 1/1 counter on Paco for each non-creature card exiled this way. So, not really sure how good that would combo off, but you're, potentially getting, you're exiling stuff, so it could go either way, but this guy gets 1/1 counters on it, and then the other one, potentially plays non-creature spells that are exiled that way, so potential downfall is getting rid of some creature cards, but then you're maybe playing some instant sorcery something from exile. Had some tokens that are double-sided. A lot of the other commander decks or regular decks I open, they're usually towards the back, and you're going through all the cards before getting to the tokens, so that's a little different. So we have Commander Tower, which is fairly common in most commander decks. It's a land that you tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And then we have Frontier Bivouac. It's a land, Frontier Bivouac, enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it to add a forest, an island, or a mountain. So it's in a 3-color deck. It's kind of helpful to have a land that taps for any of the 3. Then we have Gruul Turf. It's a land. Gruul Turf enters the battlefield tapped. When Gruul Turf enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and you tap it to add a mountain and a forest, which is kind of cool that it's tapping for both instead of a one or the other. So, if you have something that requires both, like, the couple of legendary creatures we've seen so far that have, both of those in it. Halimar Depth. It's a land. Halimar Depth enters the battlefield tapped. when Helmar Death enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. So similar to the scry ability, only you don't have the option of putting it on the bottom of the library. It's, you're looking at them and then choosing the order that they're staying in at the top. And it taps for an island. Is it Boilworks? Is it Boilworks enters the battlefield tapped? When is it Boilworks enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. It taps for an island and a mountain. Myriad Landscape. It's a land. Myriad Landscape enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a colorless mana, or you can pay to tap it and sacrifice Myriad Landscape to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Ruptured Spire. It's a land. Ruptured Spire enters the battlefield tapped. When Ruptured Spire enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you pay 1. Tap to add 1 mana of any color. Simic Gross Chamber. It's a land. Simic Gross Chamber enters the battlefield tapped. When Simic Gross Chamber enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand. You can tap it for a forest and an island. Rugged Highlands. It's a land. Rugged Highlands enters the battlefield tapped. When Rugged Highlands enters the battlefield, you gain a life. It taps for a mountain or a forest. I kind of like these, dual lands that, have the gain a life off the entering the battlefield. Next we have Swiftwater Cliffs, which is the same thing, just a different color combination. So it's a land. Swiftwater Cliff enters the battlefield tapped. When Swiftwater Cliff enters the battlefield, you gain a life. And instead of being red-green, this one's blue-red. So you tap for either an island or a mountain. And then the last color combination, Thornwood Falls. It's a land. Thornwood Falls enters the battlefield tapped. When Thornwood Falls enters the battlefield, you gain a life. This one's blue-green, so it taps for a forest or an island. And then we get to all the basic lands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it looks like there's 8 forests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 islands, and only 2 mountains. It has the most forests for non-basic lands. Islands is the middle, and mountains has the least for basic lands, but it has, appropriate mix of the, dual lands to kind of compensate for whatever you might have in here. Decoy Gambit. It's an instant that costs 2 and an island. For each opponent, choose up to 1 target creature that player controls, then return that creature to its owner's hand, unless its controller has you draw a card. So it's kind of a cool thing that you're forcing your opponent to either return something to their hand, a creature, or let you draw a card, which either would be potentially beneficial. Eon Frolicker, it's a 5/5 creature, elemental otter for 2 and 2 islands. Has flying. When Eon Frolicker enters the battlefield, if you cast it, target opponent takes an extra turn after this one. Until your next turn, you and planeswalkers you control gain protection from that player. You and planeswalkers you control can't be targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted by anything controlled by that player. Nascent Metamorph, it's a 1/1 shapeshifter. Whenever Nascent Metamorph attacks or blocks, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Nascent Metamorph becomes a copy of that card until end of turn. Then that player puts all cards revealed that way on the bottom of their library in a random order. So kind of an interesting creature because you're basically cloning one of your opponent's creatures from their library whenever this guy attacks or blocks. So might potentially be good or might potentially be bad as far as, if that creature is copying it's a weak creature, you might kill this guy off. If it copies something strong, you might deal with some of your opponent's stuff. So it could really go either way. Deflecting SWAT. It's a instant for 2 and a mountain. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability. So potentially, a good spell because it almost acts as, instead of a counter spell, it acts as a redirect to, someone goes to, do 3 damage to one of your creatures, you can be like, yep, instead of one of my creatures, I'm going to have that 3 damage dealt to your creature instead. So sort of a counter spell on steroids because, instead of saying that didn't happen, you're saying it's happening to you instead. Lavabrink Floodgates. It's an artifact for 3 in the mountain. You can tap to add 2 mountains. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put a doom counter on Lavabrink Floodgates or remove a doom counter from it. Then, if it has 3 or more doom counters on it, sacrifice Lavabrink Floodgates. When you do, it deals 6 damage to each creature. So obviously it's a little bit of a waiting game for a board wipe because you're adding or subtracting counters on it to then sacrifice it when there's 3, but then it does 6 damage, so it doesn't say destroy, it says deal 6 damage. So anything that might say indestructible, where it's not technically doing lethal damage through keywords like destroy, where it's doing it in the sense of -6 to the defense. It's kind of sneaks around certain things. Curious Herd. It's an instant for 3 in the forest. choose target opponent. You create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls. So if you're playing against an artifact deck, you can get a handful of 3/3 tokens for, however many artifacts that player has. Glade Muse. It's a 2/4 beast for 2 in a forest. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, that player draws a card. Ravenous Giant Antithorium. It's a 3/3 beast for 5 and 2 forest, and it has Devour 3. As this enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. This creature enters the battlefield with that many 1/1 counters on it. When Ravenous Gigantatorium enters the battlefield, it deals X damage divided as you choose among up to X target creatures, where X is its power. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power to Ravenous Gigantatorium. So, where you're getting 1/1 counters on it for devouring creatures. Devour 3, let's say you devour 10 creatures, that's 3 times 10, you're putting 31 counters on it, and then it deals X damage, where X is its power, so 3 plus those 31 counters, it deals 33 damage divided however you choose, among, up to 33 creatures. So you could do, 6 damage to 5 creatures, and then 1 damage to 3 creatures, or you could do 1 damage to 33 creatures. There's various ways you could do it, but you could potentially get rid of a bunch of different creatures. Twinning Staff. It's an artifact that costs 3. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy. You can pay 7 and tap this. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for this copy. So even if you don't have something other than this copying spells, you tap this to copy a spell once, and then because of the initial text before it talks about tapping, you're copying it the 1 from tapping and the 1 additional time, so you're copying the spell twice. So I'm going to come back to this at some point later tonight, but later tonight we're going to start with a Planeswalker that's in this deck. So hopefully you enjoyed this so far, and check out my channel later for the rest of this deck list. So thanks, and have a good day.